Okay, so today's session we're going to look at the new GPT-5 model. So it all changed back in early August, and it's a huge change. Some people love it and some people hate it. If you are in ChatGPT, you will notice that at the top, by default, you will have GPT-5. It's the brand new model that came out in early August of 2025. What that did was consolidate all of the other models. It's really built everything into one place. So I'm going to talk to you about what that is and how they use routers and so on. I also want to share with you in this session some proven prompting techniques because we have to change the way that we prompt. I'll give you an example use case. I think we'll probably pick a prompt for bank statement analysis and how you could improve a prompt using that as a worked example. I'll also talk a little bit about agent mode because that came out in July of 2025, and GPT-5 is to some extent created to work with this more agentic process. And we'll look at some of the little tips that you might want to use in terms of your prompting, creating prompts for agentic tasks using agent mode. Right, we're going to look at GPT-5 and what's new. I'm going to go through what's new with it fairly quickly because I really want to spend today focusing on being really practical. I want to share with you 5 practical prompting tips, things that you can build into your prompts. We'll talk about how you can create a template for doing that, and I'll talk about the idea of meta prompting. If you are completely unaware of GPT-5 or you haven't been using it, you feel like you're a beginner level, but what they've done with GPT-5 then is essentially we had a whole bunch of models before that. If we go back to prior to August 2025, we had the GPT series. We had GPT 3.5, it became GPT-4, GPT 4.0, and then they released their GPT 4.5 briefly, and then GPT-4. It got very confusing with all these GPT models. They launched the advanced reasoning models, which was the O series. So they launched O1, O3, and these were for more chain of thought type of prompts, good for things like analyzing financial statements, analyzing Excel spreadsheets. And so we had to understand which model was best for what task. And then when GPT-5 came along, what it does is essentially it has a router built into it. It's now just one model, but it makes a decision, should this be a quick thinking prompt like with GPT-4, or should it be more of an advanced reasoning one? Should it think through more slowly? And it would make that decision on your behalf based on the prompt, which means we don't have to worry about all those old models and which one should we pick. But a lot of people got frustrated because they lost control. Sometimes it would do things fast when you wanted it to think slowly, and sometimes it would take a while thinking when you just wanted a quick response. It wasn't always doing what we wanted. So they made a change to it. They added a drop-down box, which would mean that you could manually choose whether you want instant, more like the old 4.0 model, or whether you want thinking, which will then do the advanced reasoning that we were used to with the O series. And if you want to go to a higher level, they have the Pro one as well. Essentially, the options are, do you want it instant like GPT-4, or do you want it to think things through like the O series? Now you have that element of control by picking the one that you want. But what they also found was that a lot of people got frustrated because they still loved the previous versions. So they enabled where you could bring back the old legacy models. For a while, you could access 4.1, 4.5, 03, etc. I don't see those now. I think that's now changed. As far as I can see on my version, it just gives me the option of 4.0. So we can still have the model that most people like the best. So you've now got a bit of choice. Some people love GPT-5, some people hate it. Now the reason why people don't like GPT-5 as much is because it's changed the way that we need to talk to ChatGPT. In fact, they brought out on the August the 7th, 2025, they brought out a GPT-5 prompting guide where their research team researched, well, how do we get better results out of out of GPT-5. Now, you can go and read this. It's actually quite a long article. It gets very technical because it covers a number of aspects. It covers agentic workflows, coding performance, which may not be relevant to you, and instruction following. You don't need to read this because I've picked out the bits that I think are most useful for you, but if you do want to read it, it's there. It's the OpenAI cookbook, the GPT-5 prompting guide. I'll ask my team to put a link to it in the notes that go with this session. One of the things that they said was that when it first came out, GPT-5, I've spent a couple of years now learning prompt engineering and how to craft prompts. I was starting to think, does this mean that prompt engineering is now less important? Because does GPT-5 now make it much easier? And what they said in their guide, this is from OpenAI, they said, however, its careful instruction following behavior means that poorly constructed prompts containing contradictory or vague instructions can be more damaging to GPT-5 than to other models. In other words, prompt engineering is now more important than it was before. 4.0 was fairly forgiving, but with GPT-5 we have to learn a few extra tips and skills if we want to get better results from ChatGPT. So what I'm going to do is share with you 5 really powerful tips that you can use in your prompting, and we'll then make it practical. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want to go back to some of the more basic stuff I did in another video, check out the video on my YouTube channel. This will nicely follow on. So let's look at 5 things. The first one is something that's actually not totally new, but the OpenAI research team have stressed this is more important than ever, and that is having clear section headers. So it's always been the case in prompt engineering that the more you structure your prompts, the better the result you get. On that point, I'm going to show you a template to illustrate some of the points. Of course, some people might be thinking, this now sounds like a lot of work to craft prompts. And I often talk about the 2 different types of prompts, the quick prompts and the prompt templates. Sometimes a quick prompt is all you need. If it's a quick, simple task, you don't need to write really long prompts. Nevertheless, even with a short prompt, it's good to use some of the things I'm going to talk about. If it's really important or something that you might repeat, like analyzing financial statements, like a prompt to answer emails, things that you might do frequently, it's worth spending time crafting a better prompt, saving it in a prompt library, in a database, so that you can then use it whenever you want. These are prompt templates, and I do recommend you build up a library. Think of these as mini systems that are going to save you time. Going back to the idea of clearly creating some structure in your prompts, do you want to break it up with sections? What I've done here is I'm using Markdown. If you're not familiar with Markdown, it's a powerful language that we can use when talking to AI systems because it creates clarity. In this particular case, with the headings, we can use hashtags to denote heading style 1, heading style 2, heading style 3, etc. In other words, if you put a single hashtag, then a space, and then something, computer systems, including ChatGPT and other large language models, see that and understand that's heading style 1. If we put 2 hashes in front and then a space, then that's heading style 2. And what that does is it creates clarity for us when we're reading our prompts back or when we're crafting our prompts, but it also creates clarity for the model because the model then knows when a section starts and when a section finishes. It makes it much more clear. And having this structure and this clarity will help contribute to getting better results. So you can see here, I'm going to show various elements of the one on the screen. This is a sample template structure that you could use. We've got a section where we talk about the role and the objective. What role do we want ChatGPT to play? If you followed my training before, you'll know that in prompt engineering, we get better results if we tell the model what role to play. If we say, for example, I want you to act as a financial accountant skilled with analyzing financial data, if the task we're asking for is to analyze some numbers and give us a report, then it's going to give us the sort of response that we'd expect as a financial accountant. It's likely to be a better response if we say act as a financial accountant as opposed to leave it blank. The default is a helpful assistant. If you want to write some marketing copy for your website, then the role might be, I want you to act as a copywriting expert. By giving it an objective or a goal or an outcome that we're looking for, that then gives it that clarity as to what are we looking to achieve from this prompt. When we give it an objective, a goal that we're looking for, then even if the rest of our prompt is not so well written, it knows what we're looking to achieve. So that's why it's good practice with GPT-5 to start off with the role and the objective and have that in a clear structure. And you can see we've got further sections here. We've got workflow checklist, instructions, and so on. So that's my first tip with prompt engineering. You want to start breaking up your prompts into sections. What it also does is the more you do this, and I've been doing this for 2.5 years now, the more you do this, when you start even creating short, quick prompts, your brain starts to get better at crafting prompts. But in my case, I always just naturally start off with what is the role, what's the goal, what am I looking to achieve here? And so that structure is now in my brain for how I craft things. Even if I just want to do a quick task, I will use some of these elements. Okay, tip number 2, and this one is very new to GPT-5, and that is planning before execution. So the OpenAI research team have told us that one of the things that will help us get better results, particularly if it's an important task, if you're doing some research, for example, and also if you're using agent mode as well, then what they say is that it will, if we ask it to plan out how it's going to do the task in advance, if we ask it to plan things out, then it gives a better result. They say in their prompting guide that a good thing to do is to have a section that I've called it workflow checklist here, but it says present a bulleted list, 3 to 7 items, each less than 12 words, dealing with the recommended workflow steps. What that does, and you'll see that in an example very soon, is it forces the model to think through from your prompt, okay, so how am I going to tackle this task? What are the steps that I'm going to go through? And when it thinks that through, it then more accurately follows the steps and does the things you've asked it to do. And then what we can do as well, as you'll see in a bit, we can get it to validate itself and check it has done all of those things. So that's best practice number 2 when it comes to using GPT. The team at OpenAI tell us that it's good practice to have a section about the output format. So this is where, and this is nothing new, this one's actually been good practice with prompt engineering since the start. It's good practice to specify in your prompts what sort of output are you looking for. For example, do you want it in markdown language? I often ask for things in markdown because I'm going to then turn it into a standard prompt, and I want the hashtags and the asterisks, I want embolden and so on. You might want it in markdown. You might want it to put it in a separate canvas. Canvas is another one of their tools, one of the features that I love in GPT. And if you are in GPT and want to use Canvas, you can do it manually. You can go into the tools, it's the plus symbol, and you will find there is one called Canvas. If you can't find it, just put a / in the start of your prompt. That pulls up the list of tools. Canvas is really powerful. I won't go into the detail right now, but often if I'm doing written work, I'll want to put it into a canvas. In the output format, other things you might specify is, do you want it to be broken up into headings? Do you want your output to be in bullet points? Or do you want it to be written paragraphs? So always think about the output that you want and have that clarity in the prompt. If you were thinking about building a template GPT-5 prompt, you might have a standard section that says output format, where you would then just list some bullet points to say things like open a brand new canvas. I want you to structure it with headings for each of the main sections and bullet points, etc. Number four. So one of the things that they've done with GPT-5 behind the scenes is they've given us more control, particularly if we're using the APIs. Now, you probably are not using the APIs. It's more the coders and the software developers using the APIs. But there's a new API setting, and that is verbosity. Now, verbosity is basically how long an answer do you want? And now we can control that more carefully. So it may be sometimes that you just want a short, quick answer. You want something in overview. But sometimes we want more detail in our response. And so we can specify this with verbosity. It's a useful tool that you can use, even though it was designed for the APIs. It's a setting in the API where you can set it to be brief, normal, or longer. We can also use this facility if we're creating our own prompts. One of the things that you might want to do as you're crafting your prompts is have a section called controls. You could specify the verbosity between, let's say, brief, normal, detailed. How long do you want the output to be? That's not the only control you can use. There's also reasoning. You can tell it whether you want it to be quick, balanced, thorough. This is how much you want it to think things through. So this, if you like, is the equivalent of going into the drop-down box and specifying, do you want it to use instant? Do you want it to use thinking? Well, if you're creating a prompt template you want to cut and paste in every single time with a standard prompt, you probably don't want to have to always remember to then also select the appropriate model. So instead we can specify that inside the prompt itself. So if you're analyzing financial statements, for example, and have a standard prompt, you might want to always have reasoning depth to be thorough as a default. Essentially, autonomy is to do with the agent mode. Parallelization is a setting we can control if we want it to do tasks step by step or multitask. So let's move on to number 5. And that is something, this is new with GPT-5, and that's planning and verification. So what the team have said is that when we are using GPT-5 for more complex tasks, and also with the agent mode, we can get to think things through in steps. Stepwise thinking is powerful. I often build steps into my prompts, particularly the more complex prompts. But we can also ask it to verify. One of the things that has always been a problem with large language models, particularly in 2023, was hallucination. It would make things up. Well, one of the great things about GPT, and that's of course for accountants a big issue, particularly if we're doing things like tax research, we can't afford hallucination, we can't afford for it to make stuff up. And fortunately, these models have got better, and GPT-5 is, in a lot of the tests, now the one that hallucinates the least. That's reassuring. Nevertheless, we can ask it to double check things and think things through. And that's the planning and verification. We can use that to further reduce or capture any possible hallucination issues. If you don't know what hallucination is, essentially that's a term that's in AI. When a model gives you an answer that's wrong, but highly convincing, it's less of a problem now. But all models, whether it's ChatGPT-5, whether it's Claude, whether it's Gemini, they do still hallucinate from time to time. As accounting professionals, we need to double check everything that we do. You don't create a report and send to the client without checking it first. So some of the things that we can do here in planning and verification, we can ask it to think step by step before drafting findings. We can also ask it to verify the accuracy of what it does. And this is a bit more advanced. We can ask it to create a rubric. What we mean by that is it can create a scoring framework where it will then score itself. It doesn't have to tell us the scoring framework, but what we say to it is based on the goal, the objective, based on the task. If you remember, number 2, one of the things that OpenAI tell us is that if we get it to present a planning list of what it's going to do before it does the work, once it creates that, it's more likely to follow it through. But we can also then get it to score itself against that. And we can tell it to create this rubric. Now, you don't need to worry about what the rubric is necessarily. It's something that you could create it yourself, but actually ChatGPT is fairly good at creating its own rubric. We just tell it to do it. We say, create a 5 to 7 point rubric. In other words, come up with a scoring scale across a number of different criteria, such as clarity, accuracy, tone, audience fit, completeness, based on the objective and the prompt. Then we tell it to iterate until it passes, till it gets the right score, till it feels it's done those things correct. It happens behind the scenes. We don't need to see it. That's why it says create a private 4 to 7 point rubric. But that's what it'll do. Behind the scenes, it will come up with this scoring system, test itself against the output. And if it doesn't pass, it will iterate until it feels it's passed its scoring system on all the things that are important in the output. So I want to go through those 5 points. Let's pull that together and make it more practical for us. So what I recommend that you do is perhaps create a template for your prompts. And those of you who are, if you're in the AI Academy, you'll know that you get access to my prompt library. And one of the prompts in there is called GPT-5 Agentic Meta Prompter. And I'm going to show you what this does in a little while. Also, I'm going to use a worked example. If I just type in bank, a prompt I wrote some time ago, probably about a year and a half ago, was a standard prompt for giving it a PDF of a bank statement, and it will analyze it and create a CSV file of the transactions. And this is the prompt. It worked very well with GPT-4, but I thought, let's have a look, and now let's make it work better with GPT-5. So I took this prompt. So this is what meta prompting is. You can take a prompt that you've got that's perhaps used to work, but it's not working so well with GPT-5. You could take a prompt that you've got already, and then you could get ChatGPT to improve it. And one of the things that GPT-5 is very good at, it's very good as a prompt engineer, at improving your prompts. I created this particular prompt to do exactly that, to instantly improve your prompts. Let me show you. Let's make it practical. And so if I go up, here is the prompt. Let me just talk it through, and you might want to create your version of this. You are a prompt engineer with advanced expertise in GPT-5 prompt optimization. I want you to carefully review the prompt and follow these steps. If you follow my training, if you're in the AI Academy, if you use my prompts, you'll know that one of the things I like to do is make these easy by putting the stuff that you have to copy and paste, in this case the prompt, at the end. So there's a section in here called prompt, and this is the prompt that I want to improve. Let's have a look at the prompt first. You are a data analyst skilled in organizing and structuring financial data. Your task is to structure the transactional data from the attached bank statement into a CSV file with specific columns. So the steps to go through is to review the attached bank statement, extract the following data, transaction date, description, amounts, etc., and then create a CSV file, ensure it's accurately formatted and free of errors. This was a prompt that I created a while back for accounting firm owners if they want to analyze a PDF bank statement, and it worked very well under the old GPT models. Going back, you're a prompt engineer with advanced expertise in GPT-5. Carefully review the prompt, that's the bank statement, turning into a CSV file, and follow these steps. I want you to convert that prompt into the required template structure. This is a template structure for GPT-5. So I want you to take that prompt and put it into the format, ensuring all fields are accurately completed. If any information in the prompt is missing, unclear, or incomplete, identify the gaps and generate concise, clarifying follow-up questions. So it's going to ask you some questions, and then present your clarifying questions in a dedicated questions for you section, format as a bulleted list, and also provide a dedicated recommendation section with actionable suggestions. I wanted to look at my old prompt, which I've copied and pasted in, and I put it in that new template structure for GPT-5. Also, if it's missing anything, ask some questions, and also give me some recommendations for how I might improve that prompt. So then we have the template structure, which I've gone through. I wanted to set it out with a role and objective. I've got this workflow checklist where it plans it out in advance. I've got instructions, output format, controls, verbosity, and planning and verification. The 5 things that we've gone through so far. And there's a few other things in there as well that are a bit more advanced, but all the 5 are in there. And then we have the prompt. So I ran that, and it thought for 1 minute and 11 seconds. Okay, so it's because I wanted to think this one through and get it right. And after 71 seconds, here's the revised prompt. Role and objective, you are a data analyst. Your task is to extract the transactions from a bank statement into a clean CSV. The outcome is a validated file ready for import or analysis. The audience is finance and operating teams who need accurate, tidy data. It's then come up with what success means, because this will then create a rubric against it. Success is every transaction is captured with no omissions, columns match the required schema and order, dates and numbers are consistently formatted, account amount equals debit minus credit for each row, a basic validation report confirms totals and row counts. That is a measure of success. It's got a workflow checklist of the things it's going to go through and specific instructions. So it's going to plan the process and then execute. It will let you know if you forget to upload the PDF. It's got the output format there, which is the suggested one. We could change that. It's suggesting we have the CSV with header rows specifying in the output, what headers we want in the CSV file, what the date format should be, and so on. This is stuff that we often don't specify. We create our quick prompts and then worry why the Excel spreadsheet, the CSV file, isn't in the format we want. Well, it's because we didn't tell it what we want. That's what output format is for. We've got some controls and the planning and verification. It's confirming, for example, are we happy with that date format? What should be the currency symbol? And so on. This is great because this is telling us things that, if they're important to us, we might want to change the standard prompt we're going to use. It may be that perhaps it needs to be a different format. Perhaps we want to specify all amounts are in euros or US dollars. The more we specify in our prompts, the more predictable, the more consistent, the better the output. This prompt is coming up with questions for us to consider, like the sorting order. Do we want the in date order? Do we want from the first date to the last date to the first date? And then it's also giving recommendations we might want to think about as we craft our prompt. And this works really well. It's creating a meta prompt. Using GPT-5 as a prompt engineer is a great way to improve your existing prompts. This just happens to be one version of a meta prompter. This bit here, there are other meta prompts that we could use to improve prompts. You could keep it simple. You could say, here is a prompt I've written, it's not working for me, how can I improve the prompt? Act as a prompt engineer, and it will improve your prompt. The more detailed the prompt, the better the output. And this one I've been testing a few times. I really like this. I like the way that it takes a prompt, puts it in that GPT-5 framework that OpenAI tell us is a better way to craft our prompts, and also then come up with some questions and so on. So let me just wrap up with a couple more things. One is, I mentioned that there's this agent mode. If we go into ChatGPT and we go to craft a new chat, we have the plus button, which is the various tools we have access to, and one of them is called agent mode. It says new next to it. Agent mode came out in the middle of July, and this is extraordinary when we know how to use it. So what agent mode does is, when you craft a prompt, it will clarify a few things. It'll open up a window, a little desktop within ChatGPT, and it goes away and does research, and it will go and click on things. You can see it clicking on things. It does take a bit longer, typically 10 minutes to go through with agent mode. Where it's powerful is, let's say you want to launch a new product. You could ask it to review similar products and review forums. You could review feedback pages and so on. It'll go through and click through to different web pages and do research. It'll act like a human. If we were doing research, we would often go and click on things. We might do a Google search, click on a link, and then click on sublinks. That's essentially what agent mode does. When it's finished the end result of its analysis and its research, we can then specify that we get it to create a CSV file for us or a PowerPoint presentation. There's a number of interesting things that we can create. I wanted to mention it right now simply to make the point that some of the things we've talked about in terms of how we do prompt engineering in GPT-5 are particularly important if we are going to use this agent mode. The second thing I mentioned, where in our prompt we ask it to come up with the steps, think through what it's going to go through and tell us what the steps are, and also the validation. Those two things are really powerful when it comes to crafting prompts using agent mode. Right, so we've covered a load of stuff there, and hopefully you're going to take something away from that, hopefully something's useful there. Start structuring your prompts, because that's really powerful. Use markdown. Even better, create a template for your prompts, which gives you some guidance, some structure. Consider using meta prompting, where you feed an existing prompt of yours and a template and ask it to improve the prompt so it works better for GPT-5. That's particularly important if you are going to create prompts to use the new agent mode, because it can do some really powerful things, but we just have to make sure we know how to craft those prompts. If you've found something valuable, then please do hit the like button. I'd really appreciate that. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. See you soon.